So thank you for joining this webinar from the ACCTING project. The webinar is titled Building Resilience to Natural Disasters and Valorising Local Communities and Solidarity Networks. This webinar is organized as a partner event of the European Green Week, which focuses on water resilience this year. So thank you all for joining us. Just a quick word on the ACCTING project. So ACCTING is a project funded by the European Union to study the impact of EU Green Deal policies on vulnerable groups. The project produces knowledge and innovations to advance behavioral change for an inclusive and equal Green Deal. And we will present some of this knowledge today. My team of ACCTING colleagues will share with you findings and different perspectives coming from the ACCTING research, as well as our policy recommendations. And we're also very happy to have with us today representatives from the Municipality of Florence in Italy. So thank you, Lucia, Raffaella, and Marco for joining us today. Okay, I'm just admitting a few more people now, and we can start with the content. So I will pass the floor to my colleague James White, who will introduce research insights from ACCTING. Thank you, James.
Thanks, Claire. So my name is James White. I'm a researcher with Örebro University in Sweden. And on the ACCTING project, I work as the research line leader for Research Line 1. And today, me and my colleagues will be presenting the findings from the first part of the research project within both Research Line 1 and Research Line 2. And we have both the other researchers and research line leader from Research Line 1 and 2 as well. So next slide, please, Claire. So the two research topics that we will be kind of staying within today form 2 of the 8 research strands within the ACCTING project. Research Line 1, which I've been working mostly with, is on valorising local knowledge in the frame of community-based disasters management and mitigating exposure. And the other research line we'll be discussing is Research Line 2, which has been looking at biodiversity and land use restrictions. These two research lines have overlapping research sites. They are multi-country research projects, and they overlap in both Portugal and in Turkey. There are researchers that work in both of the research lines, and we also have built within the ACCTING project various mechanisms to allow the findings to be shared and to identify synergies between the different research lines. And to kind of collaborate on another's findings and recommendations that are derived from that. The ACCTING project is broadly looking at issues around the Green Deal and transformative change. It is taking a gender plus intersectional perspective. And through these 8 different strands, it doesn't address water as an explicit focus, but nevertheless, it comes to be an important part of the research on various these different strands. And that's foremost within these 2 strands that we're presenting today within these 2 lines. So we've tried to bring up those connections to water and water resilience in the research, and that's mostly through the presentations of the local or on-the-ground perspectives. Next slide, please. So the research has been conducted in 2 research cycles. The first research cycle was performed about 18 months ago, and the research findings have then been developed over the last year, and that's what we'll be presenting mostly today. And this was very much structured as an exploratory phase of the research. And currently we're in the second research cycle, which is much more explanatory, and the aims are slightly different. But this is to say that the findings that we present are preliminary, and we need to further validate those and develop them through the second research cycle. The focus of the first research was to identify motivators and drivers, obstacles and constraints for change at the individual, community and organizational level, to analyze the effects on gender plus inequalities by these changes, and to examine the relationship between change, vulnerability, and inequality. The research was conducted through the identification of vulnerability factors in local communities affected by these different strands, or the way that the Green Deal operates in these strands, and then through narrative interviews with more than 400 research participants, including within Research Line 1, 40 interviews, and within Research Line 2, 50. Next slide, please. So Research Line 1 on disaster preparation. The objective of the research in Research Line 1 has been to study how local communities are already active actors in the prevention, preparedness, and management of disasters related to natural hazards, to learn from their experiences and diverse insights, and to explore how they can or should be further empowered to improve their resilience and capacity to initiate the gender plus intersectional transformations needed to tackle climate change. And the connection here with water is most clearly evident in the example of the flooding that some of the research has taken up, particularly in Florence. And we're lucky today to have both the researchers in Florence and also representatives of civil defence, civil protection in Florence as well. So the primary findings of this research, as I said, quite preliminary, still need to be verified and developed. That first, disasters become disastrous, natural hazards become disastrous, depending on the conditions in which people live. So we need to be careful not to naturalize events as disasters, and that it's important to consider the social conditions in which people live and come to be to condition how a disaster unfolds. Second is that the dominant strategies of disaster management emphasize general education programs and aim to raise awareness and motivate preparatory action amongst local communities. Third, that disaster awareness, preparation, and response are all gendered. And we found in our research a kind of divergence between, on the one hand, certain masculine subject positions and responses to disaster, which can reinforce dangerous forms of ignorance and protectionism. And on the other hand, more feminized forms of response, at least more closely associated with feminine subject positions, that emphasize more community solidarity and organizing to counteract some of the socioeconomic deprivations which can create the social conditions for disasters to emerge. The fourth finding of this research line, part of the research cycle, is that local people are well placed to perceive, understand, and respond to their social and natural vulnerabilities to disaster. That there is already agency for positive transformative change amongst these local persons, and that oftentimes this exists in places where you would not necessarily expect it to exist. So we have some fantastic stories, some fantastic examples of stories of people who are extremely motivated and active, even if their conditions are extremely difficult or have come from certain forms of deprived backgrounds. So there's that where the location of, or where agency exists, is not always where you would expect it to exist. And then finally, disaster can be effectively managed by addressing social vulnerabilities, so those conditions which produce disaster, which turn a natural hazard into a disastrous event, by activating those local agencies and by building and reinforcing community capacities to respond. So addressing more slow forms of preparedness so that when a natural hazard event does occur, communities are able to act with resilience. Next slide, please. Research line 2, biodiversity protection. This research line explores behavioural change appearing with the establishment of protected areas within the European Union, for example, natural parks and Natura 2000, and not only the European Union, sorry, but in Europe more broadly. to understand the match of biodiversity land use restrictions and socioeconomic needs of vulnerable groups from a gender plus perspective. So the preliminary findings from this research line are first that biodiversity is not only of economic value, but is also of benefit to personal well-being. So speaking with vulnerable communities who in proximity to protected lands, they spoke quite often of the kinds of beneficial social and psychological effects of proximity and use of nature and conservation. That conflicts can arise, nevertheless, in these communities from economic misuses of nature, mostly due to pollution or to resource exploitation. That policy change, which responds to community voices and activism, is needed at all scales of government, from the local to the regional to the national. And that this, an example of how this can be done is to improve proximity and access to nature amongst vulnerable communities. Fourth, that nature protection and conservation efforts are crucial to raising public awareness of the importance of biodiversity. And fifth, that social norms and values play an important role in nature protection and conservation through the intergenerational transfer of knowledge, for example. So that's my introduction finished, and I'll now hand you over to Gabriele, who will talk more about an on-the-ground perspective from Florence in Italy.
James, thanks very much. I'm Gabriele Quinti. I am from Knowledge and Innovation. Knowledge and Innovation is a research center based in Rome, Italy, one among the partners of ACCTING. Personally, I am working since more or less 20 years on societal issues related to climate change. Next, please. So, my role here is to speak from a ground perspective of how civil protection is working in Florence. My presentation will be completed, more than completed, by the intervention from the civil protection. Self Raffaella will probably show better than me what I will try to introduce now. My first aim is to state as the civil protection system in Florence exists since a lot of time, in a certain sense, at least since the terrible flood that we had in Florence in 1966, that mobilized thousands of citizens in Florence, in Italy, and also around the world. Is the first experience of enormous mobilization of citizens on a flood event, at least in Italy. And today, the civil protection system in Florence is based on 3 pillars. The first pillar is the civil protection itself, linked, of course, with regional and national civil protection system. The second pillar is represented by thousands of citizen associations, and the third pillar are professional and scientists. Next, please. Going in depth on the second pillar, we have to underline that there are, as I said, thousands of voluntary organizations involved in the civil protection system in Florence. These organizations are local groups related to large national organizations, like, for instance, the Italian Red Cross, local associations that are grounded in the territory of Florence. Also, there are some groups that were, in a certain sense, founded by the municipality itself and formed by people that is working in public services. Then we have a spontaneous voluntarism that started already in 1966 with enormous flood that we had 6 years ago in Florence, and is very important also now. Also in the last event, for instance, in Campo Bisenzio, we saw that there are people that are not professional, are not normal volunteer of civil protection, but are students, persons belonging to cultural group, leisure groups, that mobilize themselves and participate in the civil protection system in a certain way. And then we have individual citizen volunteer. All these people is working a lot, is mobilizing themselves a lot in case of an emergency. And next slide, please. Next. It is important to consider that as far as possible, these people is involved also in preparedness. What are the pillars of the preparedness system in Florence? Raffaella will illustrate this better later. Let me just tell that there are an emergency municipal plan, periodic meeting, simulation organized time to time in a specific area of territory of Florence, and a multi-channel communication system. And since we are in the frame of an acting activity, let me underline that this communication system has entail also specific message reaching the so-called fragile subject, disabled, older people and others. And the system has the capacity to identify themselves, to localize themselves for allowing rescue specific and to put in touch with them in case of emergency. Next slide, please. As James said before me, during the first cycle of ACCTING project, we collected some narrative from citizens in Florence also. And through this narrative, I wish to highlight some issues concerning, particularly concerning preparedness. First of all, yes, the system in Florence is very effective. However, according to some citizens, people is not enough sensitized. Some people is not enough sensitized. I'm not, these are some excerpts from the narrative we collected. I am not at all sure that what we teach is followed upon later, or people tend to inform themselves about this problem in a superficial way, ignoring the causes, etc. There is also, according to the older people in Florence, a loss of memory on the previous event. For instance, it has been stated, in my opinion, there has not been a generation transfer of the 1966 flood experience. Next one, please. Perhaps the most important issue is that, albeit there are a lot of capacity building and awareness raising initiative, people that are among the most marginalized can be excluded. For instance, this is an irregular migrant that was interviewed last year. He said that I do not think about these things. It is not interested, and the people I talk to are not interested in these things either. I wish also to end my presentation with a last excerpt that is a positive aspect that should be highlighted. One of the vehicle of preparedness is through the children and through the schools. And the idea is that through children we can reach the families and then sensitizes the family, and through children it is possible to have a high level of preparedness in the whole city of Florence. And that's it from my side, but I think that now Raffaella will continue the presentation of the Florence system.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Raffaella. Lucia came a few minutes ago. so she's here with us. Well, we are talking about the civil protection of Florence today. We can say that Florence Town Hall has always paid attention on the citizens' safety and security. And we can say that this target was stronger during the last years because of the floods who struck the Italian place during these days, usually. Anyway, the civil protection has an important plan for the emergency management. And this plan has many procedures concerning the many alerts aspects. The most interesting aspect of this plan, the most interesting points of this plan are the training and the information to the population, as Gabriele said a minute ago. So, and how the population is engaged and organized with spontaneous voluntary work. This is a very special thing that happened during this year for the flood of Campi Bisenzio, but we will tell about this later. Anyway, about the training and information to the population, our operators usually go to the schools and to the most important city events, where they teach the children and the adults, actually, the good and best practices of civil protection. And they are explaining the main phases of the disaster, for example, the prevention, mitigation, preparation, response, and recovery. Well, during these events, there are some multilanguage leaflets are handed and delivered. They are also translated in many languages, such as Arabic, Chinese, Russian, obviously English, French, German, Spanish, obviously. And these leaflets have the description on how to behave and where to gather in case of emergency. And obviously there are described the emergencies such as flood or fire or earthquakes. Sorry. In addition to this, the civil protections, as Gabriele said, owns a website which is regularly updated with procedures. It has a plan with the activities and procedures, and a very technological phone system and a light panel system located at many bus stops at the tramway stops and the strategical points of the city. The very peculiar thing of this kind of system is that it's in real time. So we put the messages on the system, and the population can read immediately what's happening in the city. So this is a very useful system for us and for the citizens. Anyway, through the years, the emergency trainings are organized to recreate a catastrophic scenario where the organized volunteering is involved and practices. There are trainings to face the emergencies and to collaborate with firefighters and medical staff and healthcare providers. It's very useful for not only for the volunteers, but also for us, for the civil protection, and to all the people who are working with a disaster. A very particular thing this year, an air crash and a fire inside the biggest hospital in Florence were simulated. And many people from civil protection and volunteers participated to this training. It was very useful, actually, for everybody. Some important events that took place in Italy were in Emilia-Romagna last year, and in Campi Bisenzio, very close to Florence, this year in 2024, on November. And there were many floods, and many volunteers were involved to help. And the very peculiar aspect was the spontaneous volunteering that was born here in Florence in the occasion of Campi Bisenzio flood. Who were these people? Were untrained, not organized people. Especially, this was very nice because many young people, especially students, 15, 16, 17 years old, helped to shovel the streets from the debris and the flood debris. They were very useful. They were very important to help. But on the other hand, they weren't organized as a team. They didn't have training, they didn't have tools. So a little bit they hindered our work, even though they were very useful in the first days, in the last days, we say, of the emergency. And anyway, these are the activities of civil protection in Florence that we carry on daily, actually with passion and dedication for our city. We work day by day to guarantee the citizen security. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll keep going with the on-the-ground perspective from Turkey. I'm Esin Düzel. I'm a sociocultural anthropologist, and with my colleagues Ayşegül Altınay and Burcu Borhan Türedi, we as the Sabancı University Gender and Women Studies Excellence Center team, gender in short, we, as Jim said, work in Research Line 1 on disasters and Research Line 2 on biodiversity, as well as on food security and food values. And today, I know that our overall theme of the week is on water resilience. I would like to invite you to think water resilience through forests, as you know, as they are both connected. And I'll be talking about the defense of the forests and forest fires more specifically as well. And today I would like to make 2 points just to, give it out there. The first point is related to how the defense of nature, the defense of biodiversity connects with disaster prevention. So thanks to our work in these two research lines, we were able to trace how these two areas were connected in local people's defense of their life spaces, and people we see transfer and translate their experiences in biodiversity protection to disaster prevention. And I would like to give you 2 examples of that. The second point I would like to raise for us, and based on our research insights from the first research cycle and also the second research cycle, water resilience in general and water resilience or building resilience in defending water resources is a gendered phenomenon. So any intervention that aims to improve, aims to build resilience is actually gendered, and we need to take into account all aspects of gender norms, gender relationships, so on and so forth, which I will detail at my last point. Next slide, please. So the first case is from southern Turkey, which is a very dry region and endured a mega fire, one of the biggest forest fires in Turkish history in 2021. And we didn't hear about this village before, but during the fires and through our research in ACCTING, we could identify this small village that defended their forest very successfully, which really an exemplary case of a local people's participation in fire intervention efforts. And for our second research cycle, we actually went to the site and we talked to the local people and tried to understand what was behind their so strong defense of their territories. And it turned out that we were actually so surprised to see that this was a very unique case of women, local women, being at the forefront of forest fire intervention. And this was again cited as one of the unique cases. And secondly, they were able to establish, and it was really good to follow up, Rafaela, because they were really able to establish good relationships with the forest engineers or officers from both the firefighting department and also forestry departments, that is the public authorities. They were able to establish very unique good communication so that they could collaborate very well. And it turned out that actually through our research, we understood that they were successfully intervening in the forest fires and stop the fire from spreading a really huge part of the forest, thanks to their memories and experiences of being organized to defend their rivers from building a dam project. So in other words, they had the experience, they had the memory of coming together, of getting organized in 2008 against a dam project that cuts across their forests. And that's how they, as a community, they were empowered and they transferred this experience. They transferred, they translated also their experience in that struggle to their struggle against the forest fires. Next slide, please. And here you can see some of the, the difficulty. This is a forest village, so it was really hard to stop this forest fire unless the local people were recruited. Next slide, please. And you can see here the photos of the women were really in the, in the forefront. This is right after the that they stopped the fire from spreading. They were really in the forefront of the fire intervention efforts. Next slide, please. So the second case I would like to bring to your attention is a very recent and quite long-running struggle against the expansion of a coal mine in southwestern Turkey, in Akbelen forest. And here again, the villagers have been defending their forests from the expansion of a coal mine. The coal mine have already taken of a space that is 9 kilometers long, and they had plans to expand more, and the villagers were saying enough is enough, and they got organized and started forest watches. They started, legal cases and pushed different forms of struggle. And while doing so, they also defended the forest against several forms of disasters. Fires were one of that, and drought and several other disasters. And they also underline that the protection of the forest is important for the protection of their water resources, especially underground water resources, from the pollution that would be caused by the coal mine. Next slide, please. Here you can see that how, some of the connections of the forest to the water resources, and some, imagery, very, heartbreaking imagery of how this open cast coal mines really kill the soil. It leaves nothing behind, and also they pollute the underground water resources. And these are some of the women that are at the front of the struggle for protecting of their forests and their life spaces, so on and so forth. So just to wrap up my points for bringing these two cases together. So seemingly one case is the village, a forest village, defending their forest and helping or acting together with the state departments, state agencies to prevent forest fires. And in the second case, we have this village and the villagers, and in collaboration with the ecology activists, feminist ecology activists, who have been defending their forests and water resources and their air and their, the other living beings that they coexist with. And in many cases, we see that their experiences of defense of the nature intersect with the preparation against disasters. And we see that local communities do that really well. And so we have a lot to learn from them. Next slide, please. So if we just really follow their experiences of doing these things at the same time, we can really learn how to build resilience from bottom up. And in doing so, which is my second point, is that we need to pay attention to the different ways resilience is gender. So the building resilience needs a gendered lens. What does that mean? That means that who is considered to be vulnerable? What kind of vulnerabilities are distributed in the community? Who counts as vulnerable? Who doesn't count as vulnerable? Who is expected to be self-reliant? Important. Some of the questions can pay attention to these aspects. And also what kind of inequalities exist in terms of access to information. For instance, in the Ahmetler village, in the first village I referenced, initially the training sessions, similar to what Rafaela has mentioned, the training sessions were held in coffee houses, and those are quite male-dominant spaces. And in order to solve this problem of accessing to women, the Department of Forestry came up with collaborating with sociologist women, for instance, and they were able to, reach the word out to the women in the village, and then they could then come together and involve and access these important training sessions. So just to wrap up, is that this resilience and building resilience need to have an intersectional gender plus lens. And the final point is that this is also one of our points that we pursue in the project, is that while we put a lot of emphasis on building the resilience of local communities and the importance of their perspectives, it is important that it's important to underline that they cannot and should not replace the resources and expertise of the government. And in order for a successful intervention and successful building of resilience, they need to be engaged in a meaningful and inclusive way. Thank you. And I pass the floor to my colleague, Martin.
Hi, good to see you today. Actually, thank you also for these matters related to learning and the gender-related vulnerabilities, but also these communication matters, like as a core finding with which come also like with linking up to the recommendations. Recommendations are often boring. I hope it's not a boring, like inside approach what I can transport with that. In the framework of the EU Green Week and also these matters related to integrated water research management, we have a strong overlapping. So it comes also in that direction. We are also, I'm coming from the Center for Social Innovation, Austrian-based acting partner. I'm a landscape ecologist, and I work also with the Danube Basin, which is river basins are considered as entry points for all the directives, like the flood directive, like the wastewater treatment directives, and all these matters, which come also along with not only climate change, but with local biodiversity crisis. So we come to a local place where we have to think also about the social practice that appears. And thank you for all the role models we have seen, and also the approaches both from Turkey, but also from Italy. Thank you so much. Can you go to the next slide, please, Claire? Would be great. So yeah, there were several persons that have contributed to this recommendation. Thank you, Esin, for contributing, and also Karina Green from the Örebro University has contributed. I was somehow like linking up these matters. However, there are many matters that relate to this indigenous and local knowledge. We have not been talking what it is exactly. It's a bit hard to touch upon because it is from our side, it is considered as a unique and rich source of information. It is considered also a human, cultural, and behavioral diversity. So it is not a unique thing that you have everywhere in place. So it's place-based. And I mean, actually, it was there is research about it, but it's somehow also dispersed research on many matters. And there is also mistrust amongst the community, and we have to be very careful because it's maybe considered as knowledge theft, even if it's like supported by the official like administration. And there is also this romanticization of traditional knowledge, which has to be reflected in a positive way and a productive way. So what you see here are some matters that would bring us forward. We have a time dimension. Thank you also for the example from Gabriele and from Lucia and Raffaella. This is very important. So is there a preparation and a mutual trust co-creation process and a place-based interaction, then disasters can be met easier. Then there is like an awareness about what can be done. And when you look on these overall frameworks of how to link up, like in river basins, integrated water resource management, you always look on the social equity. You look on the economic efficiency, of course, and you look on the environmental sustainability, but the social equity is a very important matter and it has a certain dynamic. And please, Claire, go to the next matter. Yes, so when you do recommendations, you normally look on the challenges. And the challenges is come with the trusted cooperations, how to establish a trusted cooperation and a long-term relationship. So this would be the first recommendation we have outlined. It comes also with a resource sharing and appropriate financial means. So this trusted cooperation, when it includes also the administrations, it has several components to build upon in future and now, because we are in the biodiversity crisis. We have disaster matters approaching. We have also crises we don't know, like the sediment crisis at rivers. So we have the sediment crisis as well, because we have many holes on rivers, for instance. So there are many matters we have to look on. Collaborative goal setting can also bring us forward when we come with trusted cooperation or building up a trusted cooperation. So this co-evolution is an important matter. If we go to the second point in orange, so we have these local challenges. We have to team up with the biodiversity crisis. The climate change crisis is obvious and all in the media, but the biodiversity crisis is another matter. It is the local dimension which like appears to be also related much to climate change, and observing that and looking with citizens what is actually the true crisis is a good entry point to establish also new viewpoints, like we have seen with the two examples that Esin presented related to the fire and also these water-related struggles at the river. However, when we look at all that, we need new roles for the with the administration. So we need an active partnership. We need to have capacities also in the administrations to deal with these matters. And when we look on these last points, we have to have a focused and sensitive approach. think only about evidence for decisions. So there is an opportunity to go together. There is an opportunity to establish partnerships and to keep also track of success. So successes and failures. This is what like evaluation is also for, and evidence to learn what has worked, what has not worked. Because when we look, and I think you can move to the next slide. When you look, Claire, please jump on the next one. So when you look on all these many different organizations that are working, they consider only partially the social and cultural vulnerabilities in their framework. So UNDP, as always, is very active in linking up many of these matters, because they have also many activities going on. And so this is what you come across when you look in these more closely. But when you look on even on well-known initiatives like the World Wildlife Fund, they have a different understanding, and they could integrate much more deeply these local and social and cultural matters. This is very general, and it was like it should be only an inspiration. But what can we do locally? And please jump to the next slide. This was just giving like linking up to the next. So we need this slow building up of a community. We need also to see what experienced people can change, what is the unbalanced development, and how much we can actually already experience on a local level. And therefore, we think that we need this a local context which gives us entry points for more useful dealing with these topics. We have also these temporary entry points. So we need to build up trust. We need evidence. We need also a continuous collaboration, because when the disaster appears, you have to have people that know how to respond and how to meet the challenges, and to take like credit from their knowledge and their social equity that is in the vicinity where a matter has to be solved. And the last point here is, yeah, we need this co-creation process, and as a timely dimension, also the co-evolution of practice. And this means also the administrations that have to take up an active role to integrate knowledge, the communities, and to keep it in a sensitive, not exploitive way, considering also the gender difference matters. So, and now I think it's time for all the questions you have. There is the idea of posting what is most important from your viewpoint, how to do it better, how to leave no one behind, your inspirations. Feel free to go forward.
Thank you, Felix. So I know we have with us today Chiara from the Green Sand Project. And the Green Sand Project is actually a sister of ACCTING. So they are funded under the same EU call. And they're working on similar initiatives. So how to make content as accessible as possible, as to leave no one behind. So I think it would be great if we could hear from you now, Chiara.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So my name is Chiara Gunella, and I'm an anthropologist in charge of outreach and impact in the Green Sand Project. And first of all, I would like to thank all of you for your presentation that were really thought-provoking. I have learned a lot, and I will try to implement what you introduced. I forget to self-describe myself. I have green eyes, light brown hair. I have a piercing of my right nostril, and I'm sitting in my studio. I do that for accessibility reasons. And just to briefly introduce to the Green Sand Project, our project aims to foster environmental awareness. How? Through accessible climate communication and through accessible environmental education through digital tools. So at the core of our project, there is the mission to ensure that all our messages are accessible, especially for people with disabilities, that although they represent the 15% of the population, they are often excluded, forced from risk management plans. And we can see that when we see that in the risk management plans, there are only, for example, alarms implemented. So for a person that cannot listen, this is really hard. It's really hard to have access to the information. People with disabilities are also excluded from policy discussions. And we saw that with the policies related to the straw. When there was the act of forbidding straws, it was not considered that for many people with mobility impairment or chronic pain, straws are not convenience items. They're really crucial for their independence. But the fact that at the climate table, there were not collectives with disability did not allow to promote a more inclusive policies. And also people with disabilities are often excluded from climate advocacies. And we saw that, for example, online, a lot of images on the web do not have alternative text, which is crucial to have for people navigating content with screen reader. A lot of content does not have captions, which are crucial for people that are hard of hearing or are deaf, or content do not have audio description, which is crucial for people who are blind. So in our project, we try to challenge this able-centered perspective, ensuring that communication about climate change and communication about the risk that the climate change can cause are accessible for all. And we do that testing all our tools, platforms, apps. And if you want to know more about this accessible approach, you can visit our website that my colleague will share in the chat. And we also would like to invite you to a conference we are organizing, which actually is about trying to make the green transition a just and accessible one, ensuring that on the climate table, there are a lot of diverse collectives so that we can consider diverse needs. So this is a short summary. I think we have a lot of things in common between ACCTING and GreenSend, so I hope we can continue to collaborate. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Chiara. That was a great introduction, and it's great to see how we can join forces and make sure the future is more inclusive in general. So I can't see any questions in the chat so far, so feel free to type them, and if you just want to raise your hand or just ask your questions now, or if you have any comments, feel free to speak up now. We have 5 minutes.
If nobody else wants to say something, I might just add a reflection to what Chiara spoke of. So in research line 1, in the first research cycle, in the interviews that were done in Florence, there's a fantastic interview with a narrative interview with a blind man who has been involved in forms of disability campaigning for most of his adult life, and spoke quite with a lot of reflexivity about how as a blind person you need to be kind of responsive to uncertainty, and he from this spoke about how to think about disaster or disaster preparation and the relationship to uncertainty. And this was one of the examples that we had when we talked about agency being in unlikely places. And I think if you don't take the time to speak with people in these kinds of positions, then you will never know. Maybe Gabriele can add something to that. He would know the particular interview and the individual that I'm speaking about in more detail. Perhaps not.
So may I ask, or I have, Chiara, thank you very much for sharing the project. So I was doing interviews in the lovely Bulgaria, where I'm at the moment, with in a very rural community, and often because I like the approach to say this inclusiveness matter, but there could be also situations where there is a complete misunderstanding because of cultural practice, previous educational, how to say, systems that have not considered environment as an important matter. Even so, I had the question, what do you think about nature? How do you spend time in nature? But nature was for the person, also, she's also like caretaking for a disabled person. It was the garden. This was the nature. So there is not this complex viewpoint of what is environment, how things are interconnected. And I think that's a true challenge in many contexts. So, and many of the initiatives that, or I mean, some of the initiatives also co-develop these understandings. I mean, I don't mean only these, the special communities that come with indigenous and local knowledge, but rural communities, for instance, have these challenges that they cannot communicate on so quickly, respond to a topic that appears within 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but it takes a generational change. And I think that's a true challenge. Yeah, not to talk about inclusiveness, but also, I mean, it's hard to get people on board for the topics. I don't know what are your experiences in that, but
if I can add on what you said, Martin, I think it's a good point, and I think we must not take anything for granted when we construct dialogue, because as you said, the idea of nature can be really different from the perspective of from an able-centric perspective and from an unable-centric perspective. As you said, boundaries are different. My idea of nature, my idea of respect of nature is really linked to the experience that I could do. So for us, one key aspect is not taking anything for granted, although for sure we do that. So we try to be open to deconstruct our perspectives, and we try to engage as much as possible with diverse communities.
Thank you for this very interesting point. I'm just the timekeeper right now, so we're going to have to close this session because it's already 2 p.m. But I just wanted to thank everyone for their time. Thank you to all of my colleagues for the very interesting presentations. Thank you again, Raffaella, for your intervention and for joining us today. I will share in the chat the link to the ACCTING newsletter if you'd like to be informed of future events. It's only sent 4 times a year, so it's not going to be spamming your inbox. As I said earlier, we will send the webinar recording to you via email. So I'll prepare a recap email with this, as well as the link to the recommendations that we presented today. So thank you again, everyone, and we hope to see you again very soon. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a
Thank you
nice
so
day
much.
too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.